finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the BS Free MD podcast. And today's guest is someone who's become quite the outspoken advocate in the world of mental health. And her latest story is a real eye-opener. We've had her on the show before, and we're so excited to have her back. And we're talking about her being kicked out of the American Academy of Pediatrics meeting and much more. So hang on. This one's going to get really interesting. We're excited to welcome none other than Pam Garfield, a.k.a. the Truthful Therapist. She's been a licensed therapist for over 20 years, in case you haven't been following her, working with troubled teens and families. And she had to step away from her profession in 2017 due to disability. When she returned part-time, she faced a completely changed landscape. And COVID mandates forced her out, but that didn't stop her, from speaking out. She's become a strong voice for parents and helping them question the so-called experts. And today we're going to dive into her latest book as well, A Practical Approach to Gender Distress, where she offers comprehensive information for parents on gender medicine. So she's here to discuss, like I said, the bombshell of being kicked out of the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics meeting, her mission to empower parents, and some pretty wild stuff she's uncovered along the way since we've last seen her. Pam, welcome back to the show and being here with us.
Hi, that's such a good description. I need you for my PR.
Well, we can set you up. That's for sure. No problem.
Okay,
I'm going to let you kick it off.
Yeah, so I was following your posts on, I believe it was Instagram, and this whole business of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which has been an absolute thorn in my rear for I don't know how many years now. Just the insanity of this idea that you can affirm gender affirming care, all of that stuff. And that somehow they're taking this emotional distress that, teenagers have and couching it in this scientific terms. So then you go to the AAP meeting with a group of people, some detransitioners, and you're just kind of being the other side of the coin. It's like, hey, here's people, some people that transition, it does damage. It's a damaging thing. Well, take the story from there. What exactly happened? And, obviously you were screaming and throwing blood on people, I would assume, right? And that's why you got kicked out. Or was it a little different?
It was a little different.
Don't label her like that.
So I was there with some prominent detransitioners. One you probably heard of, Chloe Cole, Abel Garcia, a woman named Soren, and another man named Nicholas. And then I was with two moms and professionals, a lawyer and mom, Erin Friday, and a mom and mental health professional, January Littlejohn. And it was all of us running this booth. And it was funded by a group of organizations. It cost a lot of money. I heard something like $25,000 to have this booth, the pediatric convention. I'm not sure if I have that correct, but that's what I read. So I don't know, but it was a lot of money. And then we each had a pass, and it was a couple $100s for each of us. So they got a ton of money from us to be there on the inside, and we got that funding. And we were there for 3 days. Well, like 2, and then got kicked out because for the first 2 days, the first day, we were kind of under the radar. We were not really talking directly about gender. We introduced ourselves as a mental health. We were telling the truth. We were a mental health coalition, and we were there to approach the mental health of youth from a holistic perspective and not immediately medicalize children. And we were referring not just to the gender medicine, but also to psychotropic drugs and other medications that pediatricians quickly put children on. So we were talking about how there were several factors in mental health, and a lot of it had to do with the internet issues at home, lots of different influences. And when we talked to most doctors, they agreed with us wholeheartedly. Yes, we're doing this too quickly. We're overwhelmed. We don't know what to do. We don't, we need help with this. And then we had some flyers on the table, actually some with that had my book on it, and my book has the trans colors on it. And so they thought it was sort of pro trans. And they were like kind of trying to impress us by how affirming they were. So then we were like, well, have you thought about what that does for a child if you, as a doctor with authority, say that yes, you are the opposite gender without asking more questions? And some of them were like, wow, yeah, you're right. And then we got into some more conversations, and then the detransitioners would start speaking more about their experiences. It was really nice because you often want to talk about this subject and you want to show them a video of a detransitioner. Well, I had one sitting right next to me. Like, then I had Chloe sitting right next to me to just like talk about her story about when she was 12 years old and was put on puberty blockers and had all these negative effects. So we reached a lot of people doing this. Some we didn't really get any nasty pushback, actually. Some people were, not totally on the same page or didn't really know a lot about it. Most people just didn't know a lot about it. They were kind of just following along with the narratives, and they didn't know much. They were actually like, oh, wow, yeah, you're right. Like, oh, we told them about the CAS review. We had flyers on that. We showed them the data that's, been debunked about how this suicide line is based on a lie. And, they were really listening. And we found some really people who were really on our side about this, and those are the people like who got a copy of my book. They got a copy of this other book called Time to Think, which is about the Tavistock clinic that was shut down in the UK. And so we found some allies. So the first day we were a little shyer about it, and we really screened for like someone who we could tell really was on our side. The second day we got a little more bold and spoke more about gender more directly. And then the third day we're like, we're good. They're not going to kick us out. We're great. And then as soon as we walk in, the security approaches us, right, as we're trying to put out our materials. And this is actually online. The security guard came up to us and told us that we had violated a rule. We didn't violate a rule, actually. They told us that someone from our group last year violated a rule, but they couldn't tell us who it was and what the rule was that we broke. That was the reason they were kicking us out. That was the only explanation they told us during that time. And we had 5 minutes to pack up and get our things. And we weren't even allowed to go out the front. We had security with us the whole time and escort us while we were getting everything. And the people that came to us to tell us this news were not people from the AAP. The AAP sent people who had no idea what this was about at all. They were just the messengers. So we couldn't really argue with them. A lot of people online were angry, like, oh, they're following orders, but they didn't even know that they were following bad orders. They were just told to do this. I mean, I guess they could have asked more questions, but it's kind of weird, So that's what happened. We left peacefully, and I was actually behind the camera during the whole kicking out incident. So if anybody who's listening to this that saw the videos, that was me behind the camera. I got a little pissy at one point behind the camera, and then I realized I had to calm myself down.
Kidding. That would be me too.
The one thing that you just said in describing this, because you kind of read my mind. My first question was going to be, what was the response from physicians? Because this is a physicians conference. Okay. The one thing was, yeah, some people, people were kind of neutral and then, you got people on both sides. But what's really staggering, and this is what people really need to understand, is you said they didn't know much.
Yeah.
They just went along. And
Yes.
I can tell you that's 100% the state of allopathic medical practice in the United States. I don't really care what specialty it is. The idea that a physician would ever think for themselves, ever do their own research and not just go along with guidelines is like that's almost an anathema to most people. It's like you just stay inside your lane, which is completely nuts. Like it's completely nuts because our commitment as physicians is not to guidelines or to our regulatory bodies or anything. It's to our patients. And every single patient as an individual needs to be treated as an individual, what's best for them. And this idea that we've just become, coerced through guidelines. I mean, honestly, I think doctors are some of the easiest people to manipulate in the entire culture.
Yeah, I really noticed that theme. And beyond the gender, honestly, I know that one thing that really bothered me, which is related, but they're really into all of these screenings, these health screenings, mental health screenings. And we talked about that. So they had these screenings, and they were kind of bragging to us because they thought we were, had a different mindset. We weren't bold about who we were until we had a conversation. And so they would say, well, yeah, we have these screenings and we're really accepting. We make sure we use the chosen name and the chosen pronouns. And then they do all these screenings for all, depression screenings and the anxiety screenings, all these mental health screenings for any situation, not even one that warrants mental health, right? And so what does that do? Of course, that puts ideas in children's minds and parents' minds, and then they can be wrongfully referred to clinics that put them right onto medications that are unnecessary. They're not being treated holistically. They're not looked at. They don't even assess for how much internet the kid is using or anything that's happening at home. They send them straight to a medication or to a clinic that will send them straight to a medication. That's the other interesting thing is we would ask them what was the process when they got a diagnosis, and a lot of times they'd say we don't know. We refer them and we have no idea. They'd spend 15 minutes sometimes with the patient. Some of them told us. Most of them, it was about a half an hour per patient, and there was very little follow-up. So they didn't really know. They kind of wanted to tell us how accepting and wonderful they were, but then when it came down to it, they just didn't even know what the process was for their patients.
Isn't that just makes me sick? So here, they're so proud of these intakes, which I remember way back when our, adult child was going to the doctor and it started, I went in there with them and the nurse came in and asked all this depression questionnaire screening thing. It was the nurse. And then him looking at me like, why are they asking me this stuff? Like he was mostly embarrassed, but you're right. If you have the, plant that little seed in someone's head who, I don't know, maybe it's someone that's kind of a tomboy, but now it's like, oh, I'm not a tomboy. Maybe I'm supposed to be whatever. And then they end up down this bunny trail and end up at some therapy office. And next thing you know, they're like, no, you're not just in a phase of life and it's okay to be more masculine and you're good.
But you know what? It's a Gaussian curve. There's men that are absolutely not gay and they're more on the feminine side of being men.
We talked about that
and
before.
Then there's guys who, they grow hair out of every pore in their body and their knuckles damn near drag on the ground. Okay. I mean, so
but
why isn't that diversity? Like, shouldn't we celebrate the fact that there's men that are really into art and they're a little bit more maybe light in the loafers, but they still have a family and a wife? I mean, I think that's awesome.
Right.
But somehow
most general pediatricians aren't even thinking about it that deeply, and that's the point. They're not really realizing it, and they assume because they believe in the authority, they don't question, like you were just saying earlier, and they assume once they make a referral to a gender clinic or to any mental health clinic that the proper things are going to be done, and they don't recognize that they're a part of this really dangerous system. So they don't think that far. They're not thinking that. They actually, it depends on the person you talk to. I think a lot of them assume that stuff will be ruled out or will be explored. But we know that the really, really in like strong gender advocates, they're not going to screen for any of that. They're going to push it. It's a conveyor belt that starts really quickly and easily. Well, so they don't know that stuff.
Right.
The other thing that gets me, I mean, we interviewed Roger McMillan, and he was talking about how one of the original depression screening tools was devised by Pfizer. They invented it. So
it makes sense. Ask somebody on a bad day those questions, and pretty much anybody, it doesn't even have to be such a bad day, could show up as depressed and then end up on antidepressants. It makes sense. It's a 9-question survey, and that's it. It used to be, I mean, even not that long ago, that at least you'd have one session to get a diagnosis. It used to be at least several sessions, but it used to at least be a session. Now it's a 9-question survey that takes 5 minutes to fill out, and then boom, you're on antidepressants. And we know this is a pipeline to the gender dysphoria because we know it decreases libido and it causes dissociation. So there are all these connections here.
I was gonna, I started thinking about like you said, about the assessment. They do the screening and then they go on and they don't even really know what happened to that patient. And I'm like, there's always the time crunch of seeing patients, and they don't have time to do everything. But I'm like, what happened to even the ability for the pediatrician to sit down with the kid? And I'm not doing a counseling session as much as just like really ask some questions, talk to the parent and the child that's there, reassure them, have them come back before just like, oh, referral, referral, referral. And I used to always want to blame mid-levels for that. But I know now, I mean, it's across the board.
It doesn't matter. It's not that they're not thinking about things, it's that they're not thinking at all. I mean, that's really what it comes down to from my perspective. And, you can talk about time crunch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I call absolute 100% unequivocal bullshit on that. I work 12-hour shifts and I see 40 to 50 patients every shift. And I still somehow, not to pat myself on the back too much, am able to connect with patients in the 5 or 10 minutes I see them, that they ask, do I have a private practice because I want to see you? So you can connect with people very quickly and you don't have to be time crunch. It's not time crunch. It's time plus distraction. So what happened, and most people don't understand this, what happened with Obamacare and the stimulus package preceding it was all of these screening tools. Because as a primary care doctor, which pediatricians are, you get these huge kickbacks from insurance companies and the government if you do these screening tools. How many beers do you drink? Do you feel safe at home? Are you depressed? Obesity, smoking, etc. So what this does is it takes the focus off the patient and puts the focus on the screening tool, because that's how you get paid. And
That's
so
interesting. I didn't realize it came from that era. I didn't know where it came from.
That's where it comes from. If you really want to really freak out, look up MIPS, merit-based incentive payments system from the centers of from CMS. This is one of the central gravities with which all of this horseshit orbits, because I work urgent care. I don't do this stuff. So I see people for essentially one problem. And I would see very skilled physicians and I'd read the note, and they were so distracted by the screening tools and getting all of these metrics done that they completely lost sight of really obvious acute illness that they could have treated. Why the patient
was there.
And these weren't dumb people. These were highly skilled, highly experienced physicians. And you see it all the time. And so this government, it comes from the government. It came from Obamacare. This intrusion with, MIPS and MACRA and all of these incentive-based systems cause even a further pipeline into these referrals, which, is the gender world, is the psychiatry world, is all of it. So what we've done is we've taken primary care, where you used to go to a country doctor like me, and I would stay an extra half an hour after work if somebody's husband passed away and they needed someone to talk to. And you had a connection with the person heart to heart, to just referrals. They've become just unskilled, unthinking referral sources. And there's reasons for it, and most people don't understand the reasons. And it's really, really broken and really expensive.
Yeah, I was the impression I got from most of these doctors, most of them, they don't really believe, they're not strong believers, and they just follow, and the guidelines are important to them. And I really noticed this theme where they were trying to impress us. They were trying to show us how enlightened they were, how open they were, how accepting and honest and good they were, and then miss the plot completely. And then they're like, well, we affirm and we do this, and then I had a detransitioner sitting next to me. Well, I really wish that my doctors and my therapist asked me a few more questions and didn't just immediately affirm me, because it turned out I was having a really hard time, and now I'm dealing with lifelong damages. And then they perked up, and coming from them, they are so, these detransitioners that are public or that do this speaking, I mean, I assume even not being a detransitioner has anything to do with it. These are such lovely people. And they're so good at talking to people who have different opinions or that might be combative. They're so good at just being so warm and so genuine and so engaging that almost nobody could argue with one, just what they were saying because they were speaking from their personal experiences,
Right.
but also the way they were speaking. And it was really just very genuine. And so we had me who have the the therapeutic expertise and the letters and the credentials, which unfortunately that's how things work, especially when you're coming from doctors who look at your education and want to see that you're an expert. But then you have the patients who have been harmed right in front of them. And several of the doctors said right in that moment, I'm really sorry that happened to you. I'm really sorry that this system failed you. And it was really profound.
Oh, that's
Wow.
at least somewhat encouraging. And that's what's going to,
So I want to know. Well, this is what I would
We
do.
were that powerful; they had to kick us out. Is the whole point?
Yes, but I was going to
that's the
say.
whole
So
point.
what I want to know is because this is what I would do: is I would take my little booth and my people, and I would set up shop literally outside.
Yeah, there was no good space. It was the way it was. It's a huge, ginormous building, so there was no central area where you could do that. There actually was a group of people outside, but they honestly weren't that effective because it was so separated from where they were in this huge convention center. It was in Orlando. I don't remember the name of it, but there wasn't really a good spot. And then we were actually, when they kicked us out, we would have been charged with trespassing if we were on the property after that.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Shame on
well,
you.
I was going to say,
AAP.
if you were at the DNC, you could have just set up next to the abortion van.
Yeah.
They had an abortion van at the DNC.
That's a whole other thing, right? They call that healthcare. That's a whole other podcast. Yeah.
It's just
It's connected though, because Planned Parenthood, as we know, are the people that are behind the hormones and pushing this trans agenda. And I mean, they're losing business for abortion, so they had to find business elsewhere.
So would you go to another one of these meetings? Do you think you'll be invited back or elsewhere?
Well, we won't be invited, that's for sure.
But if you pay a nice chunk of money,
we'd have to go under a different name, and that's that's kind of what we did. I think that's actually what I heard through Chloe that was emailed to one of the organizers, that we were deceptive about who we were, and that's why we were kicked out, which is sort of true, but we were honest at the same time. We were a coalition, but they didn't like, so last year, Fair for Medicine, I think, were the people that set up a booth, and they were not allowed to come back because, of course, the activists knew they found out they were there. And I heard there were a few more arguments at that. Then we were very chill. Honestly, if there's anyone that it seemed like they were not going to agree wholeheartedly, then we just kind of let it go. We were trying to find the people that just didn't really know what's going on, or the people that agreed with us. We weren't trying to change minds of people who really strongly believed in it, because they're not the people we were looking for.
Right.
So we really tried to just avoid any type of confrontation, but also while being honest. So anyway, I just got off topic. So we were there. So last year they were there with Fair for Medicine, I believe, and they were not allowed back. So I think Chloe was there with Fair, and my guess is it was her. She broke a rule, quote unquote, but no, she didn't break a rule. She's just, really hard to argue with.
But
broke a rule.
I hear
that just sounds so childish.
No,
to me,
well, it is. But I hear hope, because I actually do hear hope, because what happens is it's these useful idiots that we can actually reach and change. And it doesn't matter about changing the mind of these insane surgeons and what. You're not going to change their mind. Okay, they're going to be, believing whatever ideology they're going to believe. But if physicians really are disengaged and not thinking, that's a bad thing. But it also is that's a group of people you can influence and harvest. All you got to do, they're smart people. You just got to get them to think
and get them the right information. It's been censored.
Yes.
They only have one point of view because the AAP and all of these institutions have completely weeded out people that have spoken up against this in the past, or just even just had questions. They've been weeded out, and there's only one point of view that's been allowed. We can talk about that study that has been censored this entire time by that doctor about puberty blockers. There are a lot of studies like that, and then studies that have been already debunked are still quoted as fact, and that's what they're told, that they're studies. And then instead of looking up what they're referring to and notice that it's a ridiculous sample size and no control group and all of these other things that disprove their goal, they say, well, they say, the studies say, the data says, and I'm a data person, so okay, and they don't question. They also really just believe in the AAP and institutions and superiors, so they just carry on.
Not like institutions and superiors have ever done anything bad. Right? Like, I mean, it's just that's what just like those are the groups that you're supposed to distrust the most because they have them. I mean, it's like saying if you take a 9mm pistol and put it to your head and pull the trigger and assume there's a bullet in the chamber, there's no evidence that that causes death. Well, yeah, because it hasn't been studied. Because you don't need to study it because it's common sense that you're going to die. But that's a lot of this stuff. Well, there's no evidence of it. Well, just because there's no evidence doesn't mean something isn't true. It just means it's never been looked into. And they do this kind of data fuckery all the time.
We can go off on a lot of subjects about this. Vaccines were really heavily pushed at this, and there was no one pushing back on that because they're not allowed in there, right? So there are a lot of different subject matters we could get into that I was observing at this conference that had no pushback, that everyone just completely just accepted as fact and truth that we know has some questions.
Right.
Yeah, well, if you don't know the difference between a boy and a girl, and if you think that giving a novel gene therapy to a 6-month-old who has zero risk of what you're trying to treat with the gene therapy, you are an unthinking beast. You are at best a useful idiot.
Because Moderna was there and they had a booth and they were promoted.
Yeah. Because those are just obvious facts. You don't give a therapy to somebody that can gain no benefit and only has risk, regardless of what it is. And number two, boys and girls are different. Right. And the machinations and the imaginations of a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old are not science and they're not objective. They're just a kid being a kid. Like the lack of common sense is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is interesting. The trust in authority, the trust in the institutions I mean, you guys, I think, are different, and you're not the only ones, but you spend all those years studying and becoming this doctor and believing in all the people that taught you these things and all of these institutions that taught you these things. I think it's too hard to face the fact that they might be wrong on some really important subjects. So they don't question it. Like, obviously, I think they have common sense, but for some reason they don't tap into that common sense, or they have these assumptions in their minds about what's really happening. So everybody has these different degrees of what's happening. Some know what's happening and think it's okay. And then a lot of them don't really know what's happening. They don't know what it means when they send a child to a gender clinic, or they don't really think about just being accepting and using a different pronoun, what that leads to. They're like, well, it's just a word. It's just I'm just being nice. And they don't realize that means that they're psychologically damaging a child and their perception of reality, and they're encouraging them to avoid usually some other kind of pain that's important to address. And they don't even realize that's what they're doing because they're told this is what you do, and they just do it without going to the next step of thinking about what that might mean for children.
And I think the other thing that happens too is, we were always trained to listen to the patient. They'll tell you what's going on. So people aren't really just sitting down and listening and then letting the patient talk and share, and then using their common sense. And, if you're a young new doc and you've got all this knowledge and you want to save the world, and sometimes you forget, that wisdom, life experience, all that plays a part, and just sitting back and going, okay, when have I been through something like this in my life, or no, you putting that all together when you're treating your patient, instead of like, oh, this is like something I learned in this class, and therefore I just got to refer on, and not even actually just, listening to the patient, letting them talk, and then going, this is a rough patch of life. We all go through these. You might not say it in that way, but common sense gets lost, just life wisdom gets lost, and to the detriment of the patient, because it becomes this referral mill, and then this harmful thing.
Well,
what I want to get to, we were talking a little bit
crazy
about it. Now it's kind of changing gears a little bit, is the study that's kind of been pushed under the radar, that kind of flips all of this stuff over on its head. We were talking about it before we started recording. So
yeah, tell us about that.
Why don't you start talking about
what happened? It was just reported yesterday in the New York Times, the same newspaper that's been promoting all of these gender-affirming care procedures. I remember seeing, was it last year or the year before, this huge spread about how to affirm children and how it's so important to get them everything to affirm. And if you don't do that, they're going to commit suicide. Well, the same publication now just came up with an article to show that a study had been buried for, what did you say? Now I don't know how many years.
It
was funded by the NIH.
It was funded by the NIH 9 years, right?
9 years.
It showed that, so that it inconveniently showed that puberty blockers do not resolve mental health issues, that there's no improvement, there's no difference between kids on puberty blockers and not on puberty blockers. And it was led by this doctor named Joanna Olson Kennedy. She's the head of the gender clinic at UCLA. And she's been at this for a long, long time. She's infamous for saying that if kids get their breasts cut off, or I don't know if you talk about kids, but if anyone gets their breasts cut off, they could just go get new ones and don't think about regret. It's not a big deal. That's it. So that was that went viral a couple of years ago. I just posted on my Instagram this clip of her in NBC from 2012, where she was using this suicide blackmail threat. The anchor said, well, what if a kid doesn't, how do we know a young child can choose their gender? And then she goes, well, they can choose to kill themselves. And it was like, and then it just shut down the anchor. She was like, I don't know what to say here. And, what do they call that? Thought stopping cliches, where you just stop the person with fear, and then you can tell they didn't know what to do, because that's not something we had heard a lot, because that was back in 2012. I think now a lot of people recognize that that's a lie and that's manipulative, but at that time it was probably intimidating for that anchor to even think about saying anything. So this doctor, she hid the study and said it for political reasons. Meanwhile, it shows that puberty blockers don't help mental health, which is their entire basis for using a drug that chemically castrates children and is used on sex offenders. It's called Lupron, and it's really damaging. I've heard from people who've actually taken it just how awful it is. And and there's a lot we don't know physically. There's a lot we do know. And we know, I think it just, I can't think of a positive. Usually there's good, positive and negative. I can't even think of a positive. Cosmetically, it helps a kid stay looking young, and that's why they use it. But it's very damaging to the bones, the hearts, the cognitive development, and of course the sexual reproductive system.
Ask any woman that has to take it for fertility reasons.
No, it's the control alt delete.
And they'll tell you how awful they feel on it when they're using it for what it's intended. Nobody likes it.
No, it's the control alt delete for the female endocrine system.
Yes.
That's what it's indicated for.
Okay.
You're pushing restart and hoping that everything comes back together and she starts ovulating.
And it's horrible.
Et cetera. But yeah, so you know what this reminds me of? The castrati, which are way back in the 16th century, I think. In Europe, they thought it was really cool to have male voices that never went through puberty. So
there was just a Saturday Night Live skit about this. Did you see that?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Oh, that's a great skit.
Oh, I
And it's
didn't.
like, you mean they're going to cut off my balls? No, I don't think I want to do that. I mean,
Okay. Okay.
anyway, so,
It's funny. It's
but
funny,
the,
not funny, kind of.
yeah, it's
Yeah. No
funny enough.
kidding.
It's amazing that they actually did it. But that's what this is. It's like you have this thought in your head. I can make money off of your thought in your head by using hormones and surgery and making you a patient for the rest of your life with side effects and mental health and all of this. Like what RFK Jr. says, nothing's more valuable to pharma than a sick child because they're a
Mhm.
patient for life. You make these people patients for life. And it's the same as these courtiers in Italy, castrating young boys so that their singing voice would sound wonderful and they would be slight and thin and never mature into men for entertainment. It's the same thing.
And
It's
I think it
exactly the
comes
same
from the
thing.
fantasy, especially of men who grow up wanting to be women, that if only they had these drugs when they were a child, then their life would be so much better, so that they project their fantasy onto these children. It was really meant for the boys. And it's still obviously very damaging for the boys. And they grow up with a micro penis for one. And then if they ever wanted to get what they call the bottom surgery, they can't really have it. That's what happened to the reality TV star Jazz Jennings. Jazz Jennings was, I think, one of the first kids in America put on puberty blockers really young, and then had all these complications with his surgery. So that even if you want to go the extra mile and do all of the stuff, it still doesn't work out. Like, you still have all these problems. And Jazz is still relatively young. How is Jazz going to be as a middle-aged older person?
Well,
We don't know.
if he, she, or they makes it that far, I mean,
That too.
Exactly.
I mean, it's so unbelievably damaging.
I want to give you a chance to share about your book, a practical approach to gender distress. So, for people who haven't heard about it, tell us like what motivated you to write the book and your mission behind it and so forth.
And there's a new book.
I know.
Yeah, so I wish I named it differently, because it's actually called A Practical Response to Gender Distress, and it's so hard to remember, and I get into so many
Oops,
problems
sorry.
with the name of it. You're not the only
Sorry.
one, so I don't want you to feel bad. I even forgot it myself when I was initially promoting it. I was like, what am I don't even know the name of my own book. How am I to expect someone else to
funny.
know? I learned that lesson. I should have named it something very simple. If anyone's putting out a book, that's my advice. Think of a really simple and catchy name. Don't try to be really literal about what your book actually is.
It'd be Just Say No, right?
Yes,
That's what you call it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Just don't do it.
I've had quite success with the book, and it's been really cool to have some big names reach out to me because they heard from a parent or somebody about my book has just been self-published through Amazon. And it's written by me, of course, a therapist with all this experience, and then has been following this issue for several years now. And it starts off, it's really written for the normies, is what I say. It's written for the people who haven't been following this. That's why it's great for these doctors who I was just speaking to at this convention, because it's for people who don't know all of these lies that have been told to them, and they don't even realize that they're immersed in these lies. They just kind of go along. So it breaks down all the main talking points, like the suicide lie, why pronouns are problematic, how they use intersex and clownfish and those sorts of things to bamboozle you to think that there are multiple genders. And so it goes through those things. And it also includes a lot of quotes and pictures and art from detransitioners to talk about their experience. I talk about the harms of puberty blockers and hormones and the surgeries. But then I also get into what to do. And it's written also really for parents, but anyone I think could benefit from learning what to do. What are the action items? So taking away the internet, removing them from the influence, and ways you can approach a child. And one of the mistakes a lot of people make who agree with us is they want to just knock sense into that kid. Like, hey, you're not a boy, you're not a girl. Like, just come on, just snap out of it. And that tends to send them further away. It backfires. And sends them back to the cult. So my book has some suggestions on ways you can approach it, things you should like really even not even start a conversation, but spend more time with your child and be more present with your child, and look into issues within your family for parents to look into what's going on at home. And then once you've maybe resolved some of that, or you've taken them away from the influences, then you can open up a conversation. And I have suggestions on how to do that. And it has ways to find a therapist that's like me, that's not affirming and just like appropriate, that's not going to enforce all of this ideology. And it has a glossary of terms. I call it the Trans English Dictionary. So it has a bunch of words that if you're not immersed in this, so you understand what the hell language they're speaking.
Perfect.
So it has a lot of practical things. People describe it as an easy read. I try to keep it really simple in plain terms. I don't use clinical language, but it has a lot of clinical insight, of course, because it comes from me. And in the beginning, I tell my story, my Rip Van Winkle story, which you described earlier in the podcast about, coming to this, in this shock value of it all. So that's what the book is. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. A lot of people have said, if only I had this, a couple of years ago when I first was dealing with this with my family. I've had several detransitioners say, I wish my parents had this when I was going through this. So I've been really grateful. I've met a lot of wonderful people by having this book and, being asked to speak about it.
I think it's a wonderful resource. And are there more, not more, but are there other therapists with your same ideology putting anything out there, or is it kind of a pretty unique standalone?
There are other people who have done other things. I still think mine is unique and standalone because mine is practical, as the title,
Right.
as the title suggests. It's more straightforward. It has less clinical language. She's a psychiatrist, Miriam Grossman. She's been pretty prominent on the subject, and she put out a book that also has a lot of merit. It's called Lost in Transnation, but it doesn't really have anything practical. It's more like just understanding what this is about and what's going on, right? Where mine is more about what to do in the moment, what to say to a therapist when they use that suicide blackmail stuff. I actually have little things you can say back to them, like, wait a second, if my child is suicidal, why wasn't I notified about that? And I believe my child should have been put in a higher level of care. You're being negligent. Because what the parents are trying to do is what the therapist is trying to do is intimidate the parents that they're being, that they're not good enough as parents, so they need to defer to the expert. Whereas I'm trying to put the empowerment back in the parents' hands and say, no, you need to hold that clinician accountable for not doing their job properly. So my book has those sorts of things, and no other book has that.
Right. And that's the things that people need. It's, we can have these discussions about theories and data and the history of it, but it's like, okay, that when push comes to shove and you're with your child at home alone, it's like, okay, what do I do? And that's what's so wonderful about it, is that it's practical, is what we all need.
Well, and the thing is you read a book like yours and you go in to see the average primary care doctor,
They don't even
you
know.
will know more than they do.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nothing more intimidating to a doctor than a patient that actually really knows more. It took me several years to figure that out. And I would say, you know what? This mother of this child with this metabolic disorder knows orders of magnitude more about that than I ever will, because they live with it every day.
Yeah.
The woman is genius level IQ. She can read the studies as good as I can. So that's okay. Just accept it. Just accept that, some patients know more about certain diseases than I do. Like, that's just the way it is.
And
But
your ego doesn't get in the way like a lot of others do.
you just get all defensive, and it's like, no, the studies, the this, the that. Well, no, it just becomes, it's like,
I think of how many times someone would say, I have whatever disease. I'm like, oh, tell me about it.
No, it's
I don't know anything.
Right. It's like Del Bigtree talking about,
you can't know about everything. It's impossible.
No, exactly. Exactly.
Like when we went to that conference with Del Bigtree, and he was going through all this, his vaccine story.
Yes.
And at the end, he said, and people say to you, well, you know more than a doctor. And he's like, yes, actually on this subject, I do. And that's because he does.
It, yes.
Because he's done nothing but research it for the last, 10 years.
So I want to just jump in and say you referred to your Rip Van Winkle moment, and that's a great story. But I want people to go back to our other podcast interview with you and listen to that whole story. We'll have to find the number of the episode because you share all of that and how you just woke up literally and came back into therapy and medicine and went, what? The whole world has changed. It was like time stood still and everything was different. And that's a fascinating story. So we will link that. Go back and listen to that. But I want to talk about your new book.
Okay, can we show pictures?
Oh yeah, we didn't show pictures from the conference when we were talking about.
We will, but can we show pictures of your new book? The sketches?
I don't have them handy.
No, I have them.
Oh yeah. Yes, you can show pictures. Yes.
Okay. There you go.
Okay.
So
I just didn't know if this was like if you know.
No, we can share it. I put it on social media a little bit, so you go ahead.
Perfect.
Tell us about your new book that you're working on, what it's about, what inspired it, and
Okay, so this is a children's book for everyone who doesn't have a visual. It's called. It's going to be called Froggy Girl, which is going to be easier to remember.
I love it.
And it's about a little girl who wishes she was a frog, and everybody affirmed her. That's an annoying word. Everyone told her, "Yeah, we're going to support you on your quest to be a frog."
Mm-hmm.
And that picture I actually just had earlier was her trying on her new frog feet that she thought were neat because, I rhymed it. Her parents gave her frog feet. And the art is by a detransitioner. His name is Nicholas Blooms. He was with me at the conference that we were just talking about. He's a lovely, very talented man. And I didn't even know it at the time that he even has professional training in children's book illustrations.
Wow.
And he has told me that doing this has been really therapeutic for him, which is really cool. So this is a little scene where, she tried to catch a fly, but then she realized she was living a lie. And she realizes that she's kind of alone, even though people were nice to her, because she really can't be a frog. And then the people who are being nice to her are kind of being fake. And then later in the book, she meets a wise turtle with a horny shell that says, like, you can't be a frog no matter who you tell. and then this is the last page where she learns that, she could be how God made her, beautiful, smart, and full of fervor.
I love it.
And that. So, basically it's about acceptance. It's about, even though people are being nice and they're trying their best, and it seemed like the people in her life have good intentions. There's a little scene where the teacher gives her a flag in the classroom, and the kids, her friends were like a little weird about it, and they were not sure, but people were all very nice to her. But meanwhile, while she tried to hang out with these frogs, she felt alone. She realized she couldn't do it. And then there's this scene where she's just really lonely, and then she meets the shell, the turtle with the shell, and realizes that it's wonderful to be a girl. I think if the line was something like, she can dance and twirl. I can't remember it. I don't have it memorized, but so it's a cute little rhyming children's book with really cool art. I haven't gotten the colored versions back. Those are the sketches that Nicholas gave me. So it's in the works. I was originally going to try to release it for Christmas, but I think that's too rushed. That's the other lesson I learned in promoting my other book, was that I rushed it, and I think I should have given myself more time. So now I'm going to do that this time around, and I'll probably release it in the spring with a little more lead time to market it and have it perfect and ready.
Wow. I love it. Like that's so wonderful. I was just thinking of all those other kids' books that are out that teach them things,
Yeah, Debbie has.
Yeah, there's so many. I figured, well, I should counter it.
Yep.
Oh, and I even found a publisher to work with here where I live in Georgia. So
that's
going to
awesome.
be professionally produced.
It reminds me of when Matt Walsh wrote Wally the Walrus, and it was total sarcasm, like complete sarcasm. And all the people on the trans side were like, "Oh, this is great! It's a book about that we can relate to kids about." They didn't get the joke.
Yeah,
like, it was just. It was like,
and he's like, "I'm the top-selling LGBTQ author." I remember that.
Yeah. Yes,
he's so good at trolling. He's so good.
Yeah, he is.
There's so many books. Well, you asked me what inspired me.
Yeah.
So I've been tracking my other book, the Practical Response to Gender Distress book, And the category that it's gotten the most traction is the teen LGBTQ books. And it's weird to see my book sitting next to these really disgusting, awful graphic novel type books for teenagers. And then I start seeing all this. There's so much media that's pro-trans. It's full of lies and full of these vile images. And so I was like, we, meaning me and the rest of the world that agree with me, we got to put more stuff out there that counters that. And we can't just do podcasts about it, no offense, but like we got to do creative things, right? We got to, there's so many different ways to do this. So it just came to me to do that. And the little rhymes came, like I woke up one morning, like with the rhymes in my head, I was like, oh, I started writing it all down. Like, yeah.
That's
Well,
great.
and I think the powerful part about this, alternate media, whether it's podcast, movies, like Am I a Racist? The new Matt Walsh
That was so
movie.
good.
We haven't seen it yet, unfortunately.
Really? You have to see it.
No, I know. And then like these children's books, like you've written, and then your practical guide, like all of this stuff. What it does is, the more that's out there, the more people realize that they're not alone, and that they're actually part of the majority. There's this super vocal minority that's insane, but everyone else is either kind of just goes with the flow and doesn't say anything. And they need to be encouraged that no, you're okay. The fact that you thought that this was nuts. Yep. Experts think that too. It's just, and I think
that's why I gained some popularity when I first started talking about this. I was one of the few public voices, and I was able to do that because I was on disability and I had less to lose, and I had basically lost my career anyway for other reasons. So I wasn't afraid, and I knew that other people had real reasons to stay quiet. I wasn't judging them. So I was like, wait, I think I have a calling here. And so many people were so grateful to hear a sane person with my background just say the most basic things.
Right. Absolutely.
No, yes, I won't mention it because it's, I don't know, HIPAA, but it's really interesting over the last 4 years when you meet people and they're really scared of the medical profession. And then I start talking and we start agreeing on some things, and I kind of tease out where they're at. And all of a sudden you can hear the air go out of the room. It's like, you mean doctors actually think like me? And it's awesome.
I would be so relieved to just meet you in life. I even just had an issue with my knee. I just had knee surgery, but it took like a year to get the proper diagnosis because the MRI reading was wrong, and everyone just followed what that said and didn't look at my actual knee. And it turned out I had a torn meniscus, and I was getting all the wrong advice for so long. It's just this stuff happens constantly. They don't think for themselves. They just follow the assembly line.
Yep. No, May had an elbow issue, and finally we found a guy that was about our age that was still doing surgery.
Fourth doctor.
And he was like, no, I know exactly what this is. We'll take care of it. And we were
like, it's the same thing.
And when we left, we're like, that's the right answer. I know that's the right answer. Because
it's like a torn meniscus is the most simple thing. I had a really rare condition that I gave a little slack for because people didn't know. But this is something that every doctor should be, or I saw even 3 different physical therapists. It's not even just the doctors. And because they looked at what the first doctor said and then they didn't question it. That's what happened.
Don't worry. It will get way better with AI. So speaking of, let's have a little bit of fun. I'm going to add a picture here. Tell us about this encounter. For those listening and not watching, it's Pam standing with Rachel or Richard.
Rachel Levine.
I'm sorry. That's a man in a dress. There's a beautiful woman in a dress standing next to a man in a dress. That's what that picture is.
You can't see in the picture, but the worst part were his stockings. He was wearing these stockings that were like really thick and weird. And nobody was fooling anybody.
Those are called support hose for old people.
Okay, yeah, it might have been those.
I don't know.
Some thicker version of that?
Yes, yeah.
It was so weird.
They are some really thick, ugly support.
But it really is staggering when you actually, you're standing there, you're like a normal sized human female next to this abomination.
I mean, we laugh, but it's sad because it just looks like a man in a dress. So
yeah, guess what, buddy? You're not fooling anyone.
Although I just want to disclose, I'm only 5, with the shoes I was wearing, probably 5'3". I'm pretty petite. He's only a couple inches taller than me. He actually wasn't even that big in stature compared to a lot of people who do this.
Hmm.
But yeah, this is me at the AAP conference. He was walking by. Another mom did the same thing. And then one of the detransitioners did it. We wanted to have Chloe, who's the most famous of them, do it, but we were afraid that she'd be recognized. So we wanted to wait till the end, but then he never came through again for that, to get that photo up. But I went up to him and I acted like I was a fan, and I just said, "Hi, my name is Pam. I'm a social worker. I'd love to get a picture." And honestly, he was quite gracious. His security guard took this photograph. He actually thought I wasn't a threat, and he was like, he told the security guard it's okay, and then let them take the picture. And we're standing in front of this little puppy pen right there, and they had puppies at this conference, which is really fun.
Wow.
But he liked the puppies, and we were cooing at the puppies a little bit, and then I walked away, and I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that just happened."
Well, I'm just. It's funny, but I'm thinking, why would he think you're a threat, even if you disagree with the whole
True.
thing? You're not a threat. I mean, you have a different opinion, aren't we? We're not.
No, but that's not the thinking.
It's
That's
diversity, and we're not allowed to have
it's not the thinking. I listened to part of
coexist and all that bumper sticker stuff.
No, right. But I was listening to a podcast, and they played part of Kamala Harris' speech, and she talked about violent speech. You know, the speech of the right has become violent or more or violence. And you sit there and I go, I'm like, time out. I'm like, first of all, speech is not violence. And second of all, you're calling out a guy that had 2 assassination attempts on him.
That doesn't count.
Actual violence, but his speech is violence. It's
right.
like,
and who keeps calling him Hitler to influence people to manifest the violence, right?
All these,
they like to say the right has this dangerous rhetoric. When you keep calling Trump a Hitler, I think if people believe that for real, then they have good reason to want him to die. I mean, we all know, everybody, if you had the chance to kill Hitler before he did all those atrocious things, we would take that opportunity, right? We'd at least consider it. Well, so if you believe that's true and not just hyperbole, then it makes
either
sense.
that or just buy his paintings, and then maybe he would have just been an artist and not try to take over the world.
There you go.
But he was a failed artist. Now, what am I going to do next? I don't know. Be an evil dictator and take over. It's just some of this stuff you can't, you can't make it up.
It was weird though with Levine, because honestly, if I didn't know who he was, his demeanor, he looks creepy in that photograph, but his actions weren't creepy. He didn't touch me. Like, he didn't put his hand on me. The way we were posed, he put his hands down. Usually someone will put their arm around your waist or something. He didn't even do that. He didn't touch me. And so he didn't act creepy, surprisingly, as creepy as he looks. He didn't act that way. So it's easy to get fooled and believe you're around someone that is nice, because they actually act okay. It's a weird disconnect to remember how much evil he promotes, and then at the same time he was like kind of sweet with the puppies. So I don't know.
Right. Well, at least he didn't sniff your hair.
No, he didn't sniff my hair. No. Yeah, I think if Biden were around, it would be a lot creepier. Weird, strange though. You'd think that you'd get creepy vibes from him, and behavior-wise, I didn't. Only just from appearance.
Well,
and so I find that fascinating. So
yeah, go ahead, Miss.
I was going to say, you're a therapist, so you see a lot of this stuff, and I am a person that I have very good creepy vibe detectors for, I think, a lot of personal reasons.
Well, we've been married 32 years. They're not that good.
Stop it. For personal reasons, being abused as a kid and other stuff. But I think some people, tell me if you think you disagree, but I think for a lot of people, we see, so someone like him, you think, he promotes evil stuff. He's creepy. You would be creepy vibes from anybody like that. But I would say not necessarily. I mean, I look at this person as someone who's broken with a lot of, obviously whatever's going through his head to make him want to be a woman. I mean, it's sad. And so all these people aren't necessarily filled with evil intent to like take over the world and change people in a Hitler kind of manner. It is, they're broken and they're just like acting out the part that they think is going to make their life better. And so does that make sense? Where
Yeah, I'm not sure about him because,
Yeah.
he's in a position of power.
Right, correct.
And I think he knows what he's doing, given the fact that he transitioned as an adult and has
Yes.
children of his own. So I give him less of a pass on those things in terms of
Okay.
intentions.
I
But
was
I
just
do
trying to
agree that
generalize. I was trying to generalize.
yeah, I do agree though that there are people that don't realize it and they're projecting their insecurities, and there are a lot of things. It gets tricky because I am a therapist, I am a woman, I still have that empathy, which, for better or worse, and I do have a lot of those feelings. I think that's partly why I'm passionate about this subject, because a lot of these trans people are people who are vulnerable, or people who are lost. They're people that have trauma, or they have severed family ties, things like that. And I want them to get better, and I want them to be on a path to become healthy. And I think when they're trans, that they're not. So I care about the trans people too. But there are, of course, people that are doing a lot of damage in the world,
Right.
and it's a tricky balance where you don't want to just feel bad for people and not hold them
Hope-
accountable for things that they're doing that are really harmful to large populations. You can look at someone like what's the actress Ellen Page, who it's like I feel so bad for her. But at the same time, she's so public. She's done so much damage. How many kids have also chosen to get hormones and surgeries because of her as a role model? But she's also probably really, I think, was very much harmed by Hollywood. I think she has some trauma and some severe mental health issues. So it's a tough balance to
Right.
be like, I'm angry at you, but I also recognize that there's some serious issues and you are struggling. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you're a person in power, it's a whole other ball game, because now other people's lives.
Well, and
Hang in
well,
the
there's
balance.
two things. There's one, you have power, and two, you're at the American Academy of Pediatrics. You're speaking to people that take care of children.
Yeah.
So if you want to transition as an adult like he did, because you're an autogynephile or God knows what is going on in your mind, that is your business. But you're promoting it to children. That's
He was the keynote speaker too, which shows exactly where they stand on this. The fact that
Whoa.
he was the keynote speaker,
right.
Well,
that's important to know.
that's laying your cards right
No,
there
I
on the
mean,
table.
I am to the point where if you are seeing, again, we don't practice medicine on the show, but if you are taking your kids to a pediatrician that is a card carrying member of the American Academy of Pediatrics, find a new doctor.
because
it's insane. You're part of I am not a part of any professional organization at all, because they're almost all communists.
There was so much wrong with that convention. We could go on all day. They had things about medicine and climate change. They had classes on that.
Yes, we've talked
was
about
like,
that. Mm-hmm.
There was so much madness. There was a lot of diversity and inclusion and equity talk, a lot of anti-racism. There were only a handful of gender things. I think they're honestly they realize that some people are more upset about that, but they were more bold about other subjects that are also damaging.
Yeah, like climate change is affecting your health, and how
Yeah.
to deal with climate change in the office. We covered all that. There was a whole publication.
There was a whole
ridiculous.
publication of the American Board of Family Medicine, and everything was climate change.
Yeah.
So
It's so strange.
Like, it was like when climate change comes into the office.
Yes.
How to talk to your patient about climate. Like, literally, these
The air conditioner?
Are they having symptoms of climate change?
Are they having mental illness because of climate? So literally what I did is I just changed the word climate change to Jesus and said, would they publish this when Jesus comes into the office? Talk to your patients about Jesus. It's like,
it is a religion. Yeah.
It's a religion.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
We don't have to agree on our religions, but just agree on what this is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, this has been great. It's always fun talking to you, and you're just another voice of reason, and that's spreading the gospel, which is really exciting.
Which is good news.
I know. So what do you got planned for the near future, other than, I know you're working on your book. Any other movies coming up, projects, or conferences?
I don't have any movies coming out or anything like that. I'm actually working on a curriculum that might be a bigger thing. I don't want to say exactly, but we might get it in possibly legislated somewhere or something like that. But I've I can say this. I've connected with this mom. Her name is Gabriella Clark, and she's built a program called Affirming Reality. I think the website is affirmingreality.com, and we're working together. She got her kid out of the trans cult, and she did like a step-by-step, stage-by-stage thing of how she got her kid out, and it's really great. And a lot of it overlaps with what I wrote in the book without us even talking to each other. So now we've joined forces, and me and another pediatrician and a few other people, and we're building this curriculum together to possibly,
Right.
have it be a full-blown program to train parents, and then also to train other therapists, possibly even be legislated that they have to as part of some kind of renewal of their license, things like that in certain states. So that's something we're hoping for.
Wonderful. That sounds
that
really positive and amazing.
that would be great, just to get both sides, because I know in our medical CME, continuing medical education stuff, the board of if I state board certified, you have to do these politically motivated courses. It's like equity and whatever, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. And if you don't tick the box, just like you can't renew your DEA without 8 hours of why giving people opioids is bad. And I'm like, well, you were the dipshits that, 25 years ago were telling us that we weren't, treating pain
enough.
And then the regulators, the Joint Commission that approves hospitals, came out and said pain is the fifth vital sign. It's not a vital sign at all. It's a subjective experience. I mean, it's like,
yeah,
it's like,
there's so many things. It's like you start to, once you question one thing, you realize the whole house of cards falls down, right?
Yep.
No kidding.
Right. That said, though, it's important to be grounded in kind of first principles, because sometimes I call it the losing your religion phenomenon. Like, people lose their religion and then they just adopt a religion that's 10 times worse than the one that they left.
Yeah.
So
And I get so negative that I forget that there actually are some good things. Like I get so negative on therapists in the mental health field that I forget that sometimes it really is important sometimes that
Yes.
people really do benefit from it. And I have gotten so down on it that I lose sight of that. So I have to remember it's good for me to interact with people who know what they're doing and are doing great work and are doing it when it's necessary as opposed to when it's not necessary, and can know how to limit it when it's not necessary, things like that. So yeah, of course there are people with actual mental illness, or there are people with trauma for real, that all these things have been watered down, that we forget that some people really need this stuff and it does have a benefit. So I have to remember that and not be so south on it and be like, yeah, therapists are all dumb and what's the point?
Right.
No, that's an excellent way to bring this train to the station, I think. Again, because we could talk to you for hours. Maybe we will, because you have a place in Sarasota, so we'll have to meet up sometime.
Why don't you share with us, our audience, where they can find you? I'll let you share your your website, social media platforms that are best to connect with you.
Okay, so my Instagram is, I think, where you guys see me the most. It's at the.truthfultherapist. And I do have some videos from what happened at the AAP. And I just put out one showing that horrible Dr. Joanna Olson Kennedy and lots of other things. And then my YouTube is at The Truthful Therapist, and I have a lot of interviews on there, and I put my Instagram things on there, but then some more longer format videos. I don't have like regular content in there, but like I upload things on there, so it's just sort of a nice place to store things that people can see. I have a Substack, and that's Pam the Truthful Therapist, because the Truthful Therapist was taken. So Pam the Truthful Therapist, Substack. And my Twitter is Truth Therapist, and because you can't have too many letters for Twitter. I think that's it. Oh yeah, my website is thetruthfultherapist.org.
Good job on juggling all of
and
those.
you have some
platforms, because we have a lot,
Yes.
and I can't keep up with all of ours.
I'm looking at your Instagram. And you have some great pictures of you in wigs. So,
oh yeah, and I do funny videos of myself in wigs pretending I'm a woke therapist. I have one of my pinned
Yeah, the one with the
The
blue hair.
post is me talking to myself in a funny blonde wig, yelling at myself about how affirmative care saves lives, but then I'm telling that myself that, "No, but what about, like, just looking at the person as a whole and doing an assessment?" And then I yell at myself and say, "No, you're racist."
Love it. We'll link all of the website and all the socials in the show notes, the books, and thanks again for coming on the show and giving us an update and letting us know how things are going. And I'll try to remember to link that other episode where you were on the show so people can hear the backstory and everything else, and how you unwoke yourself.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Always a pleasure, Pam. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, guys.
We'll see you soon, and keep doing great work.
Thank you so much.
All right, that was awesome. We could talk to Pam for hours. It's just so delightful to talk to somebody that actually uses the common sense that God gave them.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are interested in wanting to learn more, and grab a copy of her book, A Practical Response to Gender Distress, head over to her website, www.thetruthfultherapist.org. And there'll be links there. You can also follow her on her Instagram, as she mentioned, Twitter, or her Substack, for a lot more information on these topics. And check out her videos too. Some of them are pretty funny and really do poke fun at some of the things going on. She also has some other educational videos, both on the YouTube and the Instagram. And I'm excited to find the release of her new book coming out, I guess probably in the spring, and stay tuned for that next year. Also, it's community shout out time. And we want to give a shout out to our friend, Lonnie Olson. Thanks for your kind words, encouraging us on social media. All of your support doesn't go unnoticed, and we're so grateful for everybody's thoughts, prayers. So we thank you for being part of the BS Free MD community. And as always, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please, we ask to have you leave a review, because it really does matter. And you hear it all the time when you listen to podcasts that aren't heavily sponsored. So please share it with friends, leave the review so it helps us get noticed. And please send us messages and emails, and subscribe for more thought-provoking conversations right here on BS Free MD.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more, and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
But we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible. We can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.